Welcome to this plenary session entitled Toward Equitable and Transformative Science Partnerships, Which Role for CIVIS? It was almost 4 years ago, or even a bit more than 4 years ago, that Hassan and the other 5 African associate member universities met first the European partners in Marseille, and we signed back then a strategic partnership agreement, and one formula really was very important during that session, and that was coined by Seblan Vilakazi, the Vice Chancellor of Witwatersrand University in Johannesburg, and he said, we won't like to build equitable partnerships in an unequal world. And that really captured the spirit of that moment and also made it into our agreements. Why? Of course, I hope I speak to an auditorium of convinced people that this is an important issue, but just remember that, of course, we live in a world of socioeconomic disparities, also impacting on our research when it comes, for instance, to funding opportunities, but also a variety of power asymmetries can be detected when we look at our partnerships. So we would like to leave out the question of why, assuming that you are convinced that this is important, and rather focus on the how. Yeah? How can we build these partnerships? What is actually at stake here? And now, 4 years later, it's a perfect moment to take stock of what we have achieved as an academic community, but also as an alliance in this regard, but also to look forward. What are the next steps? What can we do more toward equitable and transformative partnerships? And I have the pleasure to do that at first with a round table. Well, it's not a round table in geometrical terms, but of course in conceptual terms. And then with you, with the whole auditorium, before we then are proud to have a signing ceremony for the Africa Charter for Transformative Research Collaborations. But before we come to that, let's really, as a CIVIS community, reflect on this important topic. But at first, with our distinguished discussants here in the round table. And I welcome to my right, you know him already very well, Mustafa Kida, a professor here at Hassan University and the Vice President for Partnerships and Research. Then we have Mary Ryan. She's the International Research and Development Manager at the University of Glasgow. Then we have, to my very right, Professor Fabio Ciarino. He's the Vice Rector for International Research Policies at Sapienza University di Roma in Italy. And last but, of course, not least, we have Dr. Samia Chazi from the University of the Witwatersrand, Johannesburg, South Africa, with us. And colleagues in the back, could you switch to Samia? I hope Samia can hear us and see us, and I hope we can see her in a second. Samia, are you with us? She was 5 minutes ago. Samia? Ah, there she is. Samia, a very warm welcome to you. We would have loved to see you here, of course, in the room, but due to travel constraints, Samia can only participate online. Samia, I hope you can hear us. Our microphone, please unmute us. Colleagues in the back, please unmute us.
Hello, colleagues. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, now we can hear you. Can we ask? Can we ask, Samia? Can you? Okay, perfect. Then the stage is set. And we would actually like to start with you, Samia. Maybe some of you also in the audience have noticed the slight terminological difference between equitable partnerships and transformative partnerships. You know, the charter is about the latter, but we tend to talk about equitable partnerships. And I would like to start with you, Samia. What do you make of this terminological difference? Is there also a conceptual difference implied here? Is that even a contradiction or complementary? What is your view on this distinction?
Thank you, Christian. Because I'm not in the room, perhaps you will allow me to say a few words.
Please.
Hello from Johannesburg. I'm so sorry that I can't be with you in Casablanca today. And I'm really happy and delighted that you allow me to join you online. Perhaps just to say my involvement with the Africa Charter goes back quite a few years when I was invited to speak at the launch of PARC, the Perivoli Africa Research Center. And that was the first time that I heard about the ambitions of the center, which in a way culminated in the document that we're talking about today, the Africa Charter. So I'm really delighted to be here. And Christian, I don't know if you did any introductions, but perhaps just to say that I have worked in this field of international education, facilitating partnerships between universities in different countries and different regions on the globe, but particularly between Europe and Africa for more than 25 years now. So when I look at all of the questions and the topics that we're discussing today, this is where I come from. And so to your question, Christian, for me, equitable and transformative are two different concepts, but two ideas that are very closely linked, perhaps inherently so. For me, equitable partnerships are mostly about power relations and partnerships, and that's particularly important when we talk about partnerships between institutions that are located in Africa and Europe, as we are doing today, or perhaps more broadly, what we call the global north and the global south. And so equity in partnerships is, I think, mainly focusing on equitable contributions, but also equitable and mutual benefits. And that is very important and not always a given. And this is why I think we are talking about such a document as the Africa Charter. Transformative partnerships, I think, are related but very different. And for me, the key factor about transformation is that it is about enacting change. It is about acknowledging and addressing inequities that we see. But I think the important part of being transformative is to really be actively and deliberately working on redressing past and present inequalities and imbalances so that we can create a different future together for all of us. So for me, when we look at this traditional North-South paradigm, we want to move towards greater equity, inclusion, and social justice. And so perhaps to round this off, as a first contribution, Christian, for me, equitable partnerships is perhaps more inward-looking. It looks at partnerships themselves, how they are conceptualized, how they are organized, how they are implemented. And transformative is perhaps more outward-facing, where we focus on considering the impact and the legacy of the partnerships work that we do.
Thank you very much, Samia. The invitation to the panelists or the roundtable discussants, do you want to add anything? Maybe Fabio on my right, anything to add to this aspect, the distinction between transformative and equitable partnerships?
Thank you so much. Okay. So now we should
mute us now, please. Please mute us when we talk.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I guess that's a key point. So the vision of CIVIS is a long-term vision. So we would like to set up the right condition in a way to change our community within a medium-long-term perspective. And this requires concrete actions which will foster our collaboration, but also something which is more at the ethical level, how we engage together, how we're going to work on topics in a world which is evolving very fast and maybe not in the best direction possible. And this is, I guess, where we have to work. And today, signature is the first step in this direction. We want to pay attention on some key aspects, I guess. That's something that we discussed today a lot in the research councils about the role of ethics and integrity and how this alliance and with also partnership can bring the attention at the European level, international level, of some key points that we need to address as an academic community. It's a combination of these two concrete actions on one side, which need to be based on how we work together, and we would like to come back later on how we use technology in the proper way, with the right ethical framework. This can have a long impact in our society. Thanks.
Thank you, Fabio. Mary, on this point, the distinction between equity and transformation?
So I'm not sure I can add anything in terms of the distinction beyond Samia's wonderful, I think, summary of the differences there and the importance of recognizing that distinction. I think what I would perhaps add to it is, I think in order to have transformation, equity and equitable partnerships are a precursor to that, because through equitable partnerships, you have the discussions with all of the voices that you need to hear in order to then identify what is the transformation that we need to have happen. And I think CIVIS offers a really important platform for developing those equitable partnerships, those equitable relationships, those equitable conversations to ensure we're actually listening to everybody. You know, it's not just at the table, it's who's not at the table, who do we need to bring to the table, how do we enable those voices to be heard so that we can actually work together to work out what is the transformation that we need, and how do we draw on all of the diverse expertise and contributions we can all be making to then enable that transformation and end up with a legacy that is different than the way we are doing things now. So I think equity is an absolute precursor and a necessity to transformation, even though they are quite distinct in my mind, as Samia outlined.
Thank you very much. Mustafa, anything to add to this aspect?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Thank you. I wrote my ideas because my English is not fluent. So I think that there are two distinguished concepts, but they go hand in hand. And that if only equity is understood in a meaningful, practical way. I mean that too often equity is interpreted as sameness, as if all partners should play identical roles. In reality, what makes a collaboration both equitable and transformative is actually the recognition of mutual benefits. Each partner brings specific expertise, capacity, and perspective to add value to the project. And when this partner with this expertise could lead a project and bring all together with him, they can benefit from this expertise. Here we can talk about equity, if they can put all their own participation, but they could benefit from this expertise. We can talk about transformative collaboration.
Thank you very much. Let's leave this conceptual, theoretical introduction behind and move toward the practical issues. And what do you see actually as the most pressing issues, also against the background of your own experience or against the background of your own institutional, but also personal experience when it comes to non-equitable partnerships with the perspective of building equitable partnerships? So what are the concrete issues as they appear to you? Maybe we start with you, Mustafa, and the other way around now.
Thank you. From my perspective, the challenge for equitable partnership is the persistence of structural power asymmetries in global research and cooperation systems. I mean that funding, agenda setting, and knowledge production continue to be limited to certain institutions, mainly African institutions in our case. So while partnership may seem collaborative on paper, they often remain unequal in practice. I also believe that several operational challenges reinforce this imbalance, which is characterized by uneven access to funding, administrative and procedural constraints limiting fair participation, lack of visibility and alignment between partners. And from my experience, we do not always take enough time to clearly express our respective interests in things. And finally, uneven levels of engagement and commitment resulting from difference in resources and institutional priorities, which ultimately affects trust and sustainability of collaboration.
Thank you very much, Mary.
I think Mustafa stole pretty much everything I was about to say. Perhaps it would be useful. I find myself slightly self-conscious about the fact that I'm the only member of this panel who doesn't have doctor or professor in front of my name. My role at the University of Glasgow is to support all the members of our research community that want to engage in partnership with institutions based in low and middle income countries on a very practical operational level, helping identify funding, working with teams to identify the mechanisms of how their funding operations are actually going to work. How are you going to get money to that partner? We have a lot of conversations about per diems. So I operate very much in the art of the possible, helping our teams navigate the realities that are imposed upon them by broader structural inequalities. Oftentimes, the issues our teams run into are not that academics are not talking to each other, that they don't have good flow of ideas. It's they get their project into motion and they can't get the money out. An assumption was made about per diems that was not held by other members of the team. So I think a big issue we have is around assumptions about what's normal and what the default normal tends to be seen as, and then the reality of the actual working context that people are in. I don't think equity and equal mean the same thing, nor do I think they should. And so being aware of somebody's context, yes, limited Wi-Fi, yes, people have demands on their time, different governance structures, different payment structures. Often they don't translate into a difference of expectation, because even though we may recognize our colleagues in LICs work in different contexts, have different constraints, funders still expect everything is going to be delivered exactly the way they want, exactly how they want. And, you know, institutions and funders in the global north are often not flexible. So I think there's a distinction between being aware of differences in context and changing our practice because of those differences in context that I think raises really practical delivery issues for overcoming those structural barriers, because we almost sometimes reinforce, yes, we understand your context, that you don't have these resources, you don't have this support. I think the real question becomes, and where CIVIS can be a really useful platform, is discussing how do we change our expectations? How do we change the ways that we work to be more flexible, to be more equitable? And if you're interested in learning some more about that, there's a panel at 4 o'clock this afternoon with myself and colleagues in Tanzania. But yeah, I think there's some of those practical operational things that we need to be actually changing that we don't currently change because we haven't kind of pushed that envelope far enough. But I think those are barriers to real equity.
Thank you very much, Mary. And indeed, there are even more panels on this topic. So you can actually have a full stream on equitable transformative partnerships during this CIVIS Forum. But Fabio, your take on this, on the question of what are the issues we really have to look at in our agenda.
Thank you. So I fully share the previous comment. I would like to focus, due to my scientific background, a bit on the technological challenge. So when the gap in the technology can be something which stop our common path. And obviously I will refer to artificial intelligence because it's the technology which arises very quickly, too much quickly, and it's a game changer. It's a game changer globally and also within this framework. And when we think technology, we have different critical points to address. One is how you can access the technology. And how you can access the technology which is going so fast that is changing the game, and how you can adapt quickly to this. And we have seen this yesterday in the beautiful plenary lecture on University 4.0, the needs that we have as academic to be able to very quickly update our community on this. A second is how the technology has been developed, because technology is not something which is objective. The technology is developed with some target, within some framework, which cannot be our framework. Then someone uses sometimes technology which has been done for something else in other context within our realm, and thus can change the impact of the technology. One can imagine, for instance, all the bias that we have in the relations that you mentioned before, Mustafa. We have a lot of bias which are conscious or unconscious, but that today we, after years of debate, we start to be able to address how the relation. How do we handle bias of artificial intelligence? So that we don't see what's going on behind the machine. And so you go to Google, you ask an opinion, it gives you his opinion, but there is a lot of bias, a huge amount of bias. And how do we know that these systems have been trained to respect our values and our diversity? I don't think they are. And I guess that's a big challenge, because this is shifting the world towards some specific elites. And then the third point is how you can exploit technology. How you also, but you need to have it. I would like to mention AI was very fast, too fast. We are not ready. So one can ask how we can anticipate something else like that. So I'm doing quantum technology, and last year UNESCO was dedicated to the International Year of Quantum Science and Technology, and the goal of UNESCO was to raise awareness globally in all the countries that something could come, and one should start seeing what can be wrong in the evolution, and how this evolution should not be driven by small countries or small companies, since it can impact the life of everyone. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Samia, we already heard now a few issues. Technology, funding has been mentioned. How does that question relate to you? Would you answer it?
Thank you, Christian. I looked at this question from the perspective of the Africa Charter, and the 6 layers of imbalances that it encourages us to consider and to look at. And so I think all 6 of them are important, and all 6 of them have already been touched on by the contributions of my fellow speakers. And I would like to add perhaps 2 things that I think are particularly important. The first one is named the development frame in the Africa Charter. And that, I think, relates directly to the context that we have of working within North-South relationships and partnerships, where, often we deal with these binaries, the rich North and the developed North, and the poor South and the underdeveloped South, etc. So we need to kind of start changing the mindsets right from the outset of our partnerships and collaborations. We need to discuss the expectations. Mustafa spoke about the interests that we have and the needs that we have to make sure that these are critical conversations that happen right at the start and throughout any of our partnership engagements. I think we must do away, in fact, with these North-South binaries, because the realities are much more complex and much more nuanced. And perhaps in a context such as CIVIS, we have an opportunity to do just that. And the second thing that I think is really important, and perhaps also picks up some of the things that Mary and Fabio said, is the epistemological layer. Universities are sites of knowledge creation and knowledge dissemination, and this question of whose knowledge matters, I think, is at the core of the partnerships that we need to engage in, whose voices are heard. Mary, I think you spoke about that. But it's not only about bringing marginalized or underrepresented voices into the exchange, into the dialogue, into the partnership. We also have to critically think about how do we value each of them. Mary, you spoke about, the different layers and areas of expertise within universities. And that's why it's important to consider the entire research ecosystem. Because research is not only done by researchers and academics, it's facilitated, supported by research managers, by administrators in our universities. And the fact is, how do we value their expertise, their experience, and what they bring to the table? But generally, I think, this conversation is around moving away from universality to plurality and positionality. And in Africa, of course, and we are on the continent and focusing on the continent today, this is linked to Africanization. You know, what is the role and the value of African knowledges, African concepts, theories, languages? You know, we often say that we deal with wicked problems and global challenges, but are our approaches to solving these challenges truly global? I think that's a question that is worth asking. Are we genuinely drawing on the expertise of different parts of the globe? I think the COVID pandemic was a good example. You know, we can critically reflect on who developed these vaccines, who manufactures them, who holds the patents. And perhaps, and this is a link to Fabio's point about technology. We look at AI, we look at algorithms, and we ask ourselves here in the continent, and particularly at WITS, in our Mind Institute, for example, you know, how do algorithms consider that there are 2,000 African languages spoken on this continent? And you know, how does that reflect in terms of the bias that Fabio, I think, was also referring to?
Thank you very much, Samia. Let's, before we now move to you, have a third question, and the most concrete one for us as an alliance. Where and how could CIVIS now make a real impact on these issues you have just described? I mean, within the limits of the possible, maybe also which we have or which we face as an alliance of 17 different universities in 17 different countries, etc., but of course driven by a common cause here. So I would be interested in your view on that, but also maybe also with the perspective what the role of the Africa Charter could be in making a difference in our alliance and the way in which our alliance acts in the wider academic environment. And maybe, you know, to now keep the logic of the intervention, Samia, are you ready to answer that question so we can actually then move back from you to Mustafa?
Okay, thank you, Christian. I'm happy to give it a first shot. Mm-hmm. Well, I think CIVIS is a wonderful test case, or can be a wonderful test case for everything that we've talked about, but particularly for the Africa Charter. You know, as you mentioned, Christian, 17 universities, access to 17, you know, different contexts, national contexts, of course, even more institutional contexts as well, and access to so many different archives, you know, in terms of everything that we spoke about. So I think the Alliance is particularly important. It gives us an opportunity to reflect on these questions around equity and transformation. I think there are some critical questions that we can ask ourselves. You know, we all know in terms of numbers, in terms of the status of Alliance members, that there are some inequities there that we have to address and deal with on a daily basis as we're doing the work in all these different platforms and fora that the Alliance has. And I think, you know, this for me is also a wonderful opportunity. All those different activities and projects, from, you know, civic engagement, micro-credential courses, PIPs, research projects, joint master's programs, etc. All of these provide us with opportunities to critically engage with the Charter. And I don't know if you are aware, but there is actually a recent addition to the Africa Charter, which I think outlines, you know, the broad ambitions and principles and objectives. But there is now actually an Africa Charter playbook that is available for guidance and inspiration, and it was developed to help us put these equitable and transformative partnerships into practice. And that is, I think, what the Africa Charter can do for us. You asked that question, Christian, you know, to say, how can we reflect? Can we take some of these layers or all of them? But I think, you know, to be realistic, perhaps we can start with one or two, those dimensions that are outlined in the Charter, and can we reflect on them and see what they mean in our particular contexts? Then can we find ways in these contexts to change partnerships practice where we identify, you know, that this is necessary? And then can we identify what works well? And can we share those stories? Can we write about our experiences, good and bad, and contribute to, you know, global scholarship on internationalization, on partnerships, on global North-South relations, on research collaborations, and all of that? And I want to end with a concrete example of what can be done. Only yesterday, the Journal of Studies in International Education published a special issue, and the title is Advancing Epistemic Plurality Through Internationalization of Higher Education Across and with Africa. So I think I will share this with you as a concrete example of what we can do. This is a call that we can respond to. Thanks, Christian.
Great, Samia. And you opened really the notebook here for ideas, which we then, of course, will also be filled with ideas from the audience in a minute. But before we have Fabio, Mary, and Mustafa on this point, not necessarily on the Charter, but maybe also on the Charter, what can CIVIS do in this realm? How can we address these issues you also have raised in the previous round?
So thank you. So I would like to see a bit what we have been doing as CIVIS Alliance in the last few years. I'm talking more now on the research side, being a member of the Research Council. And so from the beginning, the vision has been to support the way we work together. This was a key ingredient. And we have set up several initiatives, the seed funding call, which has been then renovated. We have worked on the shared infrastructure, thanks to our chair, Edu Data, something which is coming up. So having the capability to work together in the labs, sharing the infrastructure, and then exploiting the added value of being a large alliance. We have been working to foster the mobility of PhD students. So this was the action undertaken in the last, let me say, 2-3 years. And now we need new ideas to bring on. Obviously, we always have to be careful on the balance between budget and impact. We should find here what has an impact without increasing the economical weight on our university. That's the concrete actions, but that's the concrete action where we can then, having set up the right working condition together, we can have an impact. We are already discussing new key points, especially I was mentioning this before, on ethics, integrity, how we can move in this direction, how we can exploit somehow CIVIS and all our partnership as a laboratories for a shared future, where we try to bring this point on how we should do research in this fast evolving world. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabio. Mary.
So I think CIVIS just provides an amazing platform, as Samia said, an exemplar, a roadmap for how institutions can be working together. I think something that we all talk about is mutual benefit, and okay. I think something that we have to very much acknowledge is that historically the relationship between Europe and Africa has not been mutually beneficial. It's been highly extractive. Glasgow as an institution, for example, has just recently completed repatriation of human remains to South Africa. Those remains were taken and now have been repatriated. But the history of research between Europe and Africa has been one of extraction and exploitation. And I think we need to accept that history and grapple with it and not pretend that that does not exist. I think CIVIS gives us a platform for the kind of conversations about how we move forward together in truly mutually beneficial relationships. I think this idea that, there is capacity strengthening of the global South by the global North, I think we have to move past that dynamic as well. When I look at institutions across the continent and broadly compare the continent of Africa with the continent of Europe, I think there's a lot to be learned around community engagement approaches. Involvement of community representatives on ethical review boards for research, for example, is an area that certainly my colleagues in Tanzania and Malawi, their institutions are miles ahead of us. Innovation pipelines, supporting entrepreneurship, that dynamism, agility is not something European institutions are traditionally known for. And so thinking about where are the mutual wins, how do we create conversations where we can identify what those are and work on developing them together. I think CIVIS is an incredibly powerful platform for that, given the membership and the ability to bring people together, because some of the conversations that were happening earlier, yes, innovation and technology have moved us very far ahead. It's hard to get away from the value of face-to-face interactions. And so capitalizing on being in rooms together like this, having these conversations, moving that conversation forward, I think that's a really powerful thing that CIVIS can be doing.
Thank you, Mary. And you made a very important point, which we also see here live, We in Tübingen can learn a lot from you in terms of digitalization of our teaching, for instance. That is very impressive and really is a case in point here. But yeah, that's the stage is yours, Mustafa, on this question of how do you see CIVIS' role in this topic?
I totally agree with all colleagues, Samia, Fabio, and Mary, on what they said about what CIVIS do yet. I think that CIVIS should further strengthen and fully embrace what already makes it distinctive. Its approach to collaboration as true co-creation is very important by embedding equity into the way partnerships are designed, governed, and sustained over time. Second, CIVIS should also strengthen what it has already started doing, a more assertive and structured form of advocacy. We've seen, for example, how issues like visas and mobility constraints can directly undermine even the best collaborative intentions. CIVIS therefore has a role to play in engaging more proactively with the European Commission, as you did last year. I think last year on 2023, when I go to Brussels for this meeting in the European Commission. 2 years ago, yeah. Sorry. At the same time, it's equally important to work with national governments. CIVIS could position itself as a recognized label to show to all governments that we are credible on our actions. When we have an invitation with CIVIS logo, it means that it's credible. Okay? I mean a mark of quality, impact, and trust, so that its initiatives are better understood, supported, and facilitated across countries. This would reinforce its credibility and help anchor its action within public policies. Another key to transformation is to focus on mobility of students, PhD and researchers, which is a crucial lever because it's through sustained exchanges of people, ideas, and practice that real transformation happens. It's my opinion.
Thank you, Mustafa. And I think this is not only your opinion, but the opinion of many in this room. And this is the start and a perfect transition to you, because these are, of course, also questions which we all can address and should address. And we have 2 microphones, and you are invited now also to give your view on these 3 questions. You can freely pick, what are the issues from your perspective? What are the most pressing issues also against the background of your own experiences in research collaborations, but also wider academic collaborations? What can CIVIS do, and how can also maybe the Charter help us in our agenda? And the colleagues have the microphones, and please, if you say something, please briefly say your name and maybe where you come from.
Is there the mic?
Here.
Rania, please. Rania, please.
Okay. Thank you. So good morning, I'm Karl Stöcker. I'm Executive Director of CIVIS. I joined the coordination office in Marseille on the 2nd of February. Congratulations on organizing this very inspiring and interesting session. I wanted to react to Professor Ciarino's input on technologies and rather ask a question. Since the question is whether the place of technology, which is growing, will lead to reinforced inequalities between the North and the South, or will help lower inequalities. And with regard to AI, you mentioned artificial intelligence. I would like maybe to broaden the scope to all the technologies related to data, big data, and the challenges of data in research and AI in research. So how can CIVIS address this question of research data in all its aspects, including storing of data, including ownership of data, sovereignty on data in the South, in the North, management and sharing of data? How can CIVIS be a test bed or address these challenges also and make sure, in a way, that technologies and this growing importance of data does not lead to increased inequalities between the North and the South?
Do you want to add to that immediately? Fabio, do you want to react briefly on that? Otherwise, you already made up a whole topic on what we can focus on, and maybe we can develop the ideas of how to address this topic later, but maybe Fabio, you already have a few.
I will be quite short. I guess the challenge is there, so whether the outcome will be positive or negative, it's not known today. But I will say that there is a difference with the past, that also Europe has this challenge. So it's not a challenge which stays there since decades and now concerns for Africa. Also Europe has the same challenge today. So on that topic, we may have a common path, because the challenge is for everywhere. It's for everyone, both on where the technology is. That's something in which Europe is putting a lot of attention, but it's something which is in 1 year new also for Europe. So on that, we can have a path where we try to find the right direction, but the outcome is not clear. So I guess it's hard to be optimistic on that, because it's going so fast that we need to react promptly, but especially to be aware of what we are not seeing, but which is hidden in the technological chain.
Thank you. Manuel?
Thank you, Christian, and good morning, everyone. So, my first words to, my name is Manuel Guilherme Jr. from Eduardo Mondlane University, Mozambique. So, my first words to say congratulations to the University Hassan, second for the organization. So, this is really a fantastic moment for all of us. We've been enjoying, and I hope that this is a good moment for CIVIS to meet different people whenever we want to work together. So when we met for the first time, Christian, in Marseille 4 years ago, I couldn't imagine that today CIVIS will be this movement that we are now witness, all of us. So we've done a lot, I believe. It's difficult to measure actually what we have done actually, but it's easy to see that now we managed to make sure that our institution are working together in different areas. So for Mozambique, for example, which is the only Portuguese-speaking country on the movement, so it's easy to see that we have here 8 academics from our universities collaborating, presenting projects with the other institutions. So this is really a good result they have reached together. So for the coming years, of course, we need to improve our collaboration not as a CIVIS as a network, but alliance, but also between our institution. We can have, like we are doing now with the University Hassan II, a memorandum of understanding to work together. So we can do a bilateral collaboration, which also allows our multilateral collaboration between our institutions. So Christian, congratulations to all of us. So mainly for the CIVIS coordinator who has been really working hardly to keep our movement so forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. Please, would want to, please.
So I'm Denis Benchekon, Professor Denis Benchekon from Hassan II University of Casablanca. I'm Vice Dean in charge of research and collaboration, but I'm also the National Contact Physicist of Morocco at CERN, the European Center of Nuclear Physics or Particle Physics Research. And I want to share just in few words our experience with CERN. In 1997, we were the first African and Arabic country belonging to a CERN collaboration. It was something impossible at this day. But I think this is not a technological problem. This is our manner of thinking. If you have a project and a collaboration, each partner should have clear commitments and should respect the deadlines. This is if you let your partners believe that they are able to do that, you should success. This is important. So my question: how to CIVIS can help African countries to be part of such big projects, which are very important for young researchers. If I take, for example, the same projects, you have a huge potential of technology transfer. And if you can help PhD students to go to CERN, for example, they will have many skills to develop at CERN. I think electronics, beyond physics, I mean, electronics, instrumentation, artificial intelligence, and many things to develop. So I think we can help work together on this point. It should be interesting for African countries. Thank you.
Thank you. We take away the very important point of academic mobility and the equitable and transformative dimension of this, but also this very concrete hint, to respect deadlines, which is of course always an issue in our, complex alliance. Yeah. Okay, but thank you very much. Please. Yeah.
So, Professor Samir Gibi from Hassan II University of Casablanca. I have an experience with so many projects with the United States and other countries. And the basic concern is always funds. So you have a project, you have the funds, but then when you start to manage these funds, it's getting really crazy because we operate in different financial systems. And then, Professor Bushkoni is talking about deadlines. How can we respect a deadline? How can we respect the times of deliverables while you have not reached your funds? So that's really an issue which I think CIVIS can really play a great role in that, because managing money in different financial systems, it's really very challenging. So how can CIVIS really solve this problem? So that's why, as Professor Mustafa has said, he has raised the issue of visa, for example, for our PhD students. And so that's a big issue. So we have the funds, we have the grant, but then the students, most of them, they cannot get a visa. Lots of challenges getting visas to different countries. So I hope that CIVIS Alliance has solutions for this. Thank you.
Maybe on the last aspect, I can say that we indeed have something in the pipeline, an advocacy case exactly on the visa issue. So something will come soon on that. Yeah, we will not change the world, but we will try it. Yeah. Yes, please, Pierre, in the back. And maybe we collect one or two more interventions, and then we invite our distinguished panelists to round up. I see also Stefan. Yes, Pierre, and then Stefan.
Yes.
And maybe a third one, if, okay, then here in the front, and maybe then we come to an end for this part. But please, Pierre, first.
Okay, I'm Pierre Ganter from Germany, Tübingen, and let me ask my question in French. Je me demande si CIVIS a un bureau qui reçoit les idées, les projets des jeunes chercheurs qui n'ont pas capacité d'interagir directement avec les responsables de projet. S'il y a un bureau, si j'ai mon projet, je viens vers CIVIS, je dépose, et CIVIS trouve un responsable de projet et envoie mon projet chez lui. Et puis lui me contacte, bon, on a reçu ton projet, il est intéressant, nous pouvons travailler ensemble. C'est ça ma question. Merci.
Who would like to translate the most important points for those who are not so good in French? Please, can you summarize what he said?
He's asking if CIVIS have an office which can rely between students, their ideas and their requests with the leaders of projects and the manager of projects in CIVIS.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Stefan?
Thank you. I'm Stefan Helgeson from Stockholm University. I'm the Vice Rector there. Thanks to all the panelists for very interesting interventions, and this whole question raises extremely important and complex issues. I think in terms of the values, it's probably easy to agree on the basic principles of equitable partnerships, but as we've heard now, it's always, when it comes to the details, to the practical details, that it's difficult. And this is also my experience of CIVIS in Europe. I mean, it's not easy for these 11 universities to actually work together because of our very different national systems. So there is also an internal challenge and a very intriguing ongoing experiment, both in the European context and in this partnership between European and African universities, that there's an experience here that needs to be documented and that we need to build on moving forward. And then just one point I would like to make about epistemic plurality. I think it's important to recognize that comprehensive universities themselves represent epistemic plurality. What counts as valid knowledge in engineering or physics is not the same as what counts as valid knowledge in the study of English literature, for instance. So there's an inherent plurality that we can draw on as a strength when we forge these European-African relationships. But we do, I think, need to move away from those simple binaries, and I think Samia made that point very nicely. We need to have a more nuanced understanding of the sort of inherent plurality and inherent complications of our university systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. And the last intervention from our colleague here.
Thank you. My name is Christoph Munazinga. I come from Italy. I wanted to make a question to Professor Sciarrino, talking about the ever-changing context of innovative transformation and ethics. I wanted to ask about the in artificial intelligence and its use, especially in conflicts. And I wanted, in my opinion, as of now, we kind of missed a point where we discussed how artificial intelligence is being implemented and used in conflicts. And my question is, what do you think about this first? And how do you think the universities and more in general the academic community can have an impact and a discussion, honest discussion about this? Thank you.
Okay. Then we close the plenary part, and I would like to give the chance to the panelists or the roundtable discussants to close with the most important takeaway from the discussion, maybe. But of course, Fabio, please also react to the question.
So I would like to have maybe a couple of hours to start the discussion. I will try to do in a couple of minutes something which is very relevant. We were discussing this point 2 hours ago in the Research Council about these technologies, the impacts, the dual use potential impact, how as academic we find the right balance between doing research and collaborating, and how we face the challenge of today. So just today we discussed the idea to have a focus group on dual use within CIVIS Alliance. This was 2 hours ago because we believe these topics should be discussed. We should share best practice within the university. We should try to find what is the right way, which is not easy at all, because it's so fast that it's not easy to find a clear boundary. But can the Alliance be a promoter by also using our diversity in Europe and in Africa on these topics, and how we can then use CIVIS as a common, providing input also to the European Commission in this direction? That's a very short question.
Thank you. Maybe Samia, do you want to come in? What's your most important takeaway from the discussion? Or what's your last hint you want to give?
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I think the most important takeaway is that we need more platforms like this. We need more time to go into, more detail and kind of like really unpack many of these issues that we are talking about. Like you said, I think every single one of them can be a topic for another discussion or another conference. And so I think I would just like to close with 2 African proverbs as a parting message. One, I think, is something that really, is a motivation for partnerships and for collaboration. Many of you will know this. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So I think that's always an encouragement and a reminder of why we're doing what we're doing in the partnership space. But also as a motivation to overcome, I think the huge amount of challenges that we often face. And I think it's important to kind of like start with where we are, who we are, what is our sphere of, control and influence. And there's this wonderful African proverb that goes like this: if you want to move mountains tomorrow, you have to start by lifting stones today. So let's start lifting those stones.
Thank you, Samia. Thank you. Mary, what's your takeaway?
I think my biggest takeaway is that nothing we do happens in a vacuum. There are a lot of things happening in the world right now. There are a lot of things changing in research and funding. There are a lot of things happening in our individual contexts within our institutions. We operate within different national frameworks, within different international frameworks. And I think the point that, we need to be thinking about ecosystems of research and teaching and collaboration rather than focusing narrowly. And so I think CIVIS gives us a platform to take all of those things into account to think about ecosystems in which active and equitable collaboration can happen, communication can happen, that can lead to transformation. So keeping our eyes and our ears and our minds open, I think, is the biggest takeaway for me.
Thank you, Mustafa. Last but not least.
Yeah, I think, perhaps I believe that we are on the right way. So we have to work more to enlarge the CIVIS community, to bring more people in our universities, in the projects of CIVIS. That's it.
Good point. A very good point with which we will end now this session. I would really like to thank our four roundtable discussants. Give them a big hand, please. And also thank you very much for your interventions. We can now close this part of this session, and thank you very much. You can even take a more comfortable seats now in the first row here. And we come now to the second part, the signing ceremony of the Africa Charter for Transformative Research Collaborations. And we are very proud and honored and pleased to welcome Professor Isabella Aboderin from the University of Bristol here. Unfortunately only online, but great that she hopefully made it. Isabella, can you hear us? Ah, Isabella is there. That's so great. She is the director of the Perivoli Africa Research Center, PARC, to which Samia already referred to in her introduction. And one can probably say without doubt that PARC is key in the coalition movement underpinning the Africa Charter. And we are really honored to hear a few words, a welcome address from Isabella on the signing of the Africa Charter by the CIVIS Alliance. Isabella, we are all listening to you now. The floor is yours. What is your message to us as the CIVIS research community? You see here in the room researchers from 17 plus universities in Africa and Europe.
Well, thank you very, very much, Christian. And the first thing to say is that it's an honor for me. This is really exciting that CIVIS is signing the charter is a big deal. And I'm really pleased and I'm really honored that you've invited me to share some reflections with you. And whilst I am here on your screen, I would say, and you've already indicated it, that I am speaking for the core, if you like, the core facilitating group that really is trying to coordinate the work around the Charter, which includes us, yes, at PARC in Bristol, but also and equally our friends and colleagues at the Institute for Humanities in Africa at the University of Cape Town and the Albert Luthuli Research Chair at the University of South Africa. We are together in the work that we do around the Charter. So what I'd propose to do is to reflect very briefly on some of the contexts that have given rise to the Africa Charter and what it means within those contexts. I'll reflect on the significance of the Charter and also on where I see the significance of CIVIS in particular signing the Charter. And then I'll end with a few pointers to what your signature might end up meaning in terms of practice in taking its implementation forward. So, the Charter, I think we need to understand very much as a product of its time and a product of a number of particular contexts that emerged, over the last 10 to 15 years or so. Beginning perhaps with the great decolonization movement, 2015, in South Africa in particular. Then in the 2020s, 2021, you will remember the Black Lives Matter movement, and of course the COVID-19 pandemic, all of which gave rise, I think, to a resurgent recognition of and a genuine concern with dismantling entrenched racial hierarchies and colonial legacies globally, including within academia and including specifically within North-South research relations. And within this context, you will all be aware we have seen really an intensifying debate, largely driven by the Global North, on the need for equitability in North-South research partnerships. And this idea of equitable research partnerships has unfolded in many spaces. We've seen a proliferation of debates, discussion forums, workshops, etc. on this issue. In many ways, I would say equitable research partnerships has become a buzzword. You might even say it's become a fuzzword, in that it has come to stand in the way, in some ways, of clarity on what change is really needed in practice. Within this context, the significance of the Charter arises from the fact that it challenges and it goes beyond the typical equitable partnerships thinking and efforts in perhaps 5 major respects. First, and perhaps most importantly, the Charter is explicitly South-centered or Africa-centered, a specifically Africa-centered account of how we need to understand genuine equity in research collaborations and what that equity is for. What's the purpose of fostering equity in research collaborations? And this account is underpinned by a robust intellectual basis that draws explicitly on scholarship from the continent of Africa, anti-post and decolonial scholarship that has accumulated over the last decades since the era of independence and even before then. The second significance of the Charter, I think, lies in the fact that it has an explicit focus on the global academic research system as a whole. It focuses not only on individual research collaborations, but the gaze is on the system on the whole and the need to rebalance the overall positionings of Africa, African knowledges or knowledges produced from the continent, scholars and institutions and countries in this global academic research system. And in that it sees such rebalancing as foundational also for shifting hierarchies in the global political economy. So what happens in the academic space is hugely important for Africa's place in the global political and economic order. The third significance of the Charter is that it identifies and draws attention to the multiple layers of power imbalance that are at play in research collaborations between actors in the continent and those outside, specifically in the north. So it focuses not only on visible imbalances, like the tip of the iceberg, what happens in terms of concrete project collaboration arrangements, for example, but that it also demands a focus on more underlying, deep-seated imbalances, which are essentially about the kinds of knowledge that are ultimately produced. The fourth area of significance of the Charter is that it calls explicitly for change, not only at the practice level within individual projects, but it explicitly calls for change at the structural level. It calls for adjustments in policies, in regulations, in guidelines within institutions, but also within higher education sectors more broadly, at national and regional and even global levels. And then fifth and finally, the significance of the Charter lies in the fact, I think, that it has become not only a normative frame of reference for thinking about what equity in research collaboration needs to entail, but that it has become a movement, a community with now about 130 signatories, a community committed to the fundamental change, the transformation, that the Charter asks for. And I'd say that in the present global context, where there is increasing challenge to value-based efforts, efforts that highlight the importance of equity, diversity, inclusion, and all those, this community, this movement is a potentially hugely significant strength and force. So if the Charter is significant on so many levels, the signing of CIVIS is also very significant, I think. It's a hugely important, CIVIS is a hugely important addition to the community of Charter signatories, and perhaps in three respects that I could point out here, but we can discuss those further. There might be many more. I think first is simply your civic focus, and which means the potential to really explore and learn about the relevance of the Charter and the change that it demands for locally engaged, civically focused research. The second is that you have integrated within your CIVIS network research and innovation and the coordination of it, at the center of what your network does. And this really carries the potential of advancing the Charter, of embarking on the journey of engaging with the Charter in a very systematic and broad network-wide way, which isn't always given. So this is, I think, hugely significant in terms of the potential that your signature carries. And lastly, of course, and I was so intrigued to see this on the CIVIS website, is that CIVIS understands itself as a journey. And this is exactly the spirit that also underpins the Charter, has underpinned its development right from the start. It's a journey that's unfolding organically and that we all will be shaping, as it goes and moves from year to year, from month to month, and as new signatories come on board, such as CIVIS. So I think in terms of your spirit, the spirit of your alliance, and the structure and the mechanisms that you've got in your alliance and your focus, all of those are really significant for advancing the Charter movement as a whole. Lastly, what will your signature mean in practice? What kinds of steps would we encourage you to take or expect you to take? Well, there are about 4 areas of active work and engagement that signatories are encouraged to pursue. The first is really to foster broad-based, within your institutions, within your alliance, broad-based critical debate on the Charter, across the constituencies that you encompass within your alliance: scholars, research managers, students, senior leadership. Debate the Charter and its arguments critically. Identify ways in which arguments need to be refined or extended. This is really important because the Charter, as we always emphasize, is a living document. We fully expect it to be refined and be elaborated as we go along. The second is foster processes of reflection. Bring scholars and research managers together and reflect on existing collaboration practice and deliberate on how it aligns or not yet aligns with Charter principles, and then support deliberate attempts to design new collaborative projects that try to be aligned with the Charter. Projects across disciplinary fields: the social science, the arts and humanities, life sciences, health sciences, formal sciences, physical sciences, and then actively learn from those. The third is to cultivate an openness to exploring critically your own policy architectures within your member institutions, but also within the network, and explore where they need to change to properly enable and incentivize a transformative mode of partnership working. And then lastly, participating actively as members of this community, a community of action that's unfolding around the Charter, by sharing experiences, joining debates, sharing in collective learning, and joining forces for collective advocacy, at national, at regional, or at global levels. We've developed a roadmap and several tools to support signatories in the steps that they want to take and the journey they want to embark on in working with the Charter. And we're in the process of putting together a dedicated web platform for the Charter, which will become a portal and a forum for this community of action to engage around the Charter. This website we will launch, or we are planning to launch, in July. In July, we're also convening the first meeting of Charter signatories in Accra, 1st to 2nd of July, hosted by the University of Ghana. And I would really invite you most warmly to join this event and to join the thinking around how we can together, develop the action around the Charter going forward. And I will share the invitation and details on that event separately, of course. So I want to end here and leave you with a last thought, maybe, which is that you, of course, CIVIS, of course, will forge its own journey in many ways, and many others will be able to learn and draw from what you do. But in forging your journey, you could also possibly engage with approaches that other university networks have employed in working with the Charter. And I'm thinking here specifically of the Coimbra group of universities, also a Europe-wide network which signed the Charter about 2 years ago, and which have taken some concrete steps in working with it and engaging with it within their network. So maybe engaging with the Coimbra group and drawing on some of what they've done, or joining forces with them, might be also a very concrete way to get started. So I will leave you here with that and look forward to any questions, any critical comments, or otherwise that you might have. Thank you very much, Christian.
Thank you so much, Isabella. Thank you so much, not only for really giving us the broader context, but also for these very concrete hints. And we already diarized the Ghana event and look forward to receiving the details, but also, of course, we can look it up. Thank you so much, Isabella. Indeed, maybe one, maximum 2 questions are allowed, time-wise, unfortunately, only. Anyone with an urgent, burning question? Maybe then just this one, Isabella. We will also develop now a working group, most probably, on how to implement the Charter principles in our daily practices. Could you give us, relating to your point on the significance, your assessment on the progress of this equitable transformative partnership movement, so to say? Do we see this progress still over the last years? I ask this because when you read, the news like University World News, etc., you see that it's really a topic which is more and more gaining popularity. But what is really the assessment you have on this? Are more and more universities, institutions really buying into this, investing into this, or are we rather at the level playing field here?
Yeah, thanks, Christian. That's a good question. It sort of connects to a point that I made at the beginning. I agree with you that more and more universities, not only universities, funders, international organizations, governments even, are talking the language of equitable partnerships. And we have a proliferation of guidelines also on the issue. I think what is, and conferences, and everywhere you look, it's really a buzzword. I think it has become. I think on one level that's a good thing, because there is a broad-based sensitivity now to the fact that something has to change, and a willingness to engage with that. I think what is missing, and where there is perhaps less progress than one would have hoped for or expected, is in translating that into concrete action. And there is a danger, I think, that at some point, if it becomes too much of a buzzword and too much talk without action, people will switch off and move to the next thing. That's one. And the other is that, of course, in some contexts, the very real resource constraints on academic institutions or the academic sector broadly, mean that efforts that have to do with equity, might need to give way to other more directly income generating, priorities. So there is a danger there too, that I think the progress that's been made might be stalled. And that's why the Charter is so important. A, because it really sets out a very concrete pathway of change, concrete action, concrete change that needs to happen. And B, because it has this committed community of signatories around it that are a force, collectively. And so I think by establishing the working group that you've described just now, I think you will make a very important contribution to moving the whole debate forward from rhetoric to action. And that's actually something that the Coimbra group has also tried to do, and it might be good to compare notes and see what to do, what not to do. So.
Thank you very much, Isabella, once again. And unfortunately, you cannot be here, but we will indeed now take action. And our first action is to sign indeed the Charter and to start this process you just described. And we hope that we become part of this progressive movement and really take action more than we talk about it. But before we take action, another little talk. And I would like to welcome to the stage Estelle Daudet. She's professor at the University of Lausanne and the chair of the Research Council. And then we indeed move to the signing itself.
Is it okay? Yeah, you hear me. Thank you, dear colleagues. So it's a great pleasure as chair of a research council to speak at this very special session marking CIVIS commitment to the principle of the Africa Charter for transformative research collaborations. The notions of equitable and transformative science partnership have been addressed this morning. By science partnerships means research cooperation. I just want to recall that research cooperation within CIVIS is a recent matter, actually. It just emerged a bit more than 2 years ago, okay, in November 2023, when the Research Council was established and then very quickly joined by our African partners. And at the same time, this Research Council took a first action, establishing the first research seed funding call, supporting projects, and we decided that this project it's a compulsory, and you have a bonus, so you have also an incentive, but involve European and African universities. And it was a great success with 30 selected projects involving universities from both continents. And building on this success, a second edition of this founding call has been launched in 2025, and the project has been selected and they are currently underway. And we are very pleased to observe that collaborations initiative in 2024 and in 2025 remains dynamic. So we really hope to maintain this instrument in the future phase of CIVIS, as it clearly delivers concrete results and aligns perfectly with the spirit of a charter that CIVIS is going to sign today. This is also thanks to the success of the seed funding program, that the idea of organizing a forum really to promote this Euro-African collaboration emerged, and here we are in Casablanca today. So it's a second concrete action we took, really meet together, really exchange on an equal basis. A third action and a major theme in research within CIVIS is the sharing of research infrastructure. So basically, our universities, whether in Europe or Africa, have all their own area of expertise and their all corresponding infrastructures. So developing research collaborations through access, concrete access, free access, that means, to this infrastructure, will also help balance research partnership within this alliance. And it's also an objective of the Africa Charter. Of course, obstacles remain, and they are also very concrete. We talked about visas. We talked about the banking systems, which are a nightmare. I'm completely sympathize. But we also can talk about funding, because I think you are aware that the CIVIS Alliance was not originally funded for research. It's funded for student mobility and education, but not from research. That means that the members of European Union have to find alternative way to get money for research, and the members who are not from European Union, such as Switzerland, the UK, or the African partners, must find from their own pocket if they have money. So Switzerland have money, well, more than many countries, but otherwise it's tricky. I mean, it's really an obstacle, and well, we must not be naive. It will be a challenge in also the next phase for CIVIS. So current funding instruments are not sufficient. It's clear, okay? So this is why efforts must be made to secure dedicated funding. So obtaining a funding such as a Marie Sklodowska-Curie Action Staff Exchange Grant represents a major step forward, and I would like really to take this opportunity to thank and congratulate our Secretary General Stefan Lang and his team for their tremendous work on this project. It is great. But we also, and this is my call, we also rely on you, the scientific community of CIVIS researchers. Please help us to secure money. Please help us through your collaboration, through your application. We will support you while applying to local, national, international, European, African funding scheme. We will support you, but please help us to get some money. And I sound like a politician, but yes. Other solution could be explored to strengthen our ties. And we have seen we have other problems than money. We have administrative problems, we have political problems. And I commend the work done by the CIVIS Expert Group Advocacy, because we try to influence the European authorities to implement a concrete policy of openness for academic collaborations. These are for students, for our doctoral students. These are for post researchers, for our early career researchers, etc. Please, once again, my call is to you. Please try to influence your national administration, your local administration, to help us also to do so, to get this concrete result we are all wishing for. We need to help together, we need to share our help, we need to try to influence also our political representative on the local, national and international level. So it was a lot of calls, but thank you also. I would say shukran once again today for your commitment to transformative and equitable research. And now we are going to sign the Africa Charter for Transformative Research Collaboration, and this signature will be conducted by our Secretary General Stefan Lang. So Stefan, if you want to come. And so look at Stefan, because with his signature, and yes, we can help him. With his signature at the endorsement form, CIVIS will declare its commitment to the Charter principles and become part of a Charter coalition. With this step, we end a longer discussion within CIVIS how to promote equitable Euro-African partnership, and we think that the ambitious goals of this charter are not only worth supporting, but are also good for us, since we are the only European University Alliance with African associate members, and we will be the first to sign the charter. So it will also bring to us a special profile into our alliance. The real work only begin. It will begin by Stefan's signature, but then there will be other steps, and we don't want to find principles. principles are not enough. We need to take action, and we see that first step as, and Stefan is still waiting for me to end my speech, but yes, only a few words. We need to actively implement all these actions in our alliance and all the activities we have. So thank you. It will be a long-term process. It will be maybe a hard process, I know, but to which I invite everyone in the CIVIS research community to engage. And the first one will be Stefan Land. Thank you.
Yes, I've signed this document now. Of course, I was waiting until the very last word, and I was really inspired today by this wonderful panel, by the intervention of Isabella, and then also, of course, our dear head of the Research Council. It was a long way to go, and I think indeed we fully commit to the principles of the Charter. We try our best. We are most probably the first network which is really, yeah, I'm a geographer, north and south, you know, you can also to turn the world upside down, and then it would be south, north. But anyway, it's African, European, it's Africa first, we know. This is our real world experiment. CIVIS is transforming as we are experimenting, as we are collaborating, as we're moving together. And I know jointness is a tough word, you know. We know this really from our educational programs, from attempts to share infrastructure. The good thing I think in CIVIS is that while we talk a lot, indeed, we discuss a lot, but then actions are following, you know, and we have a lot of instances already on the plate. And I think we are continuing like that. I'm deeply moved now because I think, well, maybe not all of you know that my professional life started in Africa. You know, my first, professional contract was in Mozambique, indeed. Yeah, so I'm also a little bit academically a kid of this continent, of this wonderful continent. And therefore, I think my signature on behalf of CIVIS, a huge crowd, as we know. I've presented the figures yesterday, and it's not about the size, but it is indeed the biggest alliance in Europe, and of course the most significant, supported with our African partners in terms of transcontinental endeavor. Thank you very much, and all the best for us.
Thank you very much, and I think now it's lunchtime.